The ghost of a girl knelt in his dead wife's garden, and Tyson Beck knew his mind had finally cracked like drought-baked earth. Rain hammered the tin roof of the ranch house with the fury of 1,000 drumbeats, each drop a reminder of promises the sky had broken for 3 years running. Through the kitchen window, past the lightning that split the Montana darkness, he saw her, a slip of a woman in a torn dress, hands pressed together in prayer among the withered rose bushes Sarah had planted before the fever took her. Tyson's coffee cup trembled in his weathered hands. 6-year-old Knox slept upstairs, trusting his daddy to keep the monsters at bay. But what do you do when the monster might be your own fractured mind? The loneliness had been eating at him like cancer, whispering poison in the dark hours when sleep wouldn't come. Some nights, he found himself talking to Sarah's photograph, begging her to tell him how to raise their boy without her steady hand to guide him. The woman's lips moved silently, her dark hair plastered to her skull like a mourning veil. She swayed with each gust of wind, but never toppled, as if rooted to that exact spot by invisible chains. The storm seemed to bend around her, as though even nature recognized something sacred or cursed about her presence. "Daddy's losing it," he whispered to the empty kitchen, his voice barely audible above the storm. Just like old Ronan said I would. Ronan Vega had been his nearest neighbor, a bitter man who'd taken perverse pleasure in predicting Tyson's downfall after Sarah's death. "Mark my words, Beck," he'd said with that crooked smile. "Grief will eat you alive from the inside, turn you into something that ain't quite human anymore." But ghosts don't leave footprints in the mud, and Tyson could see the deep impressions. Her knees had carved into the saturated earth. Tyson pulled on his oilskin coat and stepped into the maelstrom. Rain stung his face like buckshot as he approached, his boots squelching in what had become more swamp than garden. The woman didn't acknowledge his presence, just kept praying to whatever god listens to the desperate at midnight. Lightning illuminated her profile in stark relief, revealing a face that might have been beautiful before pain carved its story into every line. Up close, she was real enough. Flesh and blood and terror carved into every line of her face. Her dress had once been blue calico, now torn and stained with something darker than rainwater. A purple bruise bloomed across her left cheek like a twisted flower, and there were rope burns around her wrists that spoke of recent captivity. "Miss," his voice cracked like a boy's. "Miss, you can't stay out here. This storm will kill you sure as bullets." She looked up then, and Tyson's breath caught in his throat. Her eyes were the color of winter's sky, pale and haunted and older than her 20-odd years should allow. In their depths, he saw something he recognized, the hollow stare of someone who'd bargained with death and lived to regret the terms. When she spoke, her words cut through the storm with startling clarity. "He buried me here once." The simple statement hit him like a physical blow. Tyson had heard his share of strange things in 35 years of living. Tales of ghosts and curses from the old-timers, whispered stories around campfires that made grown men check their shadows. But never had 5 words carried such weight of truth and terror combined. "Who?" he managed, though part of him already dreaded the answer. "Who buried you?" "Ronan Vega." She said the name like a curse, like speaking. It might summon the devil himself from whatever hell had claimed him. 3 years passed, when the roses still bloomed and the world made sense. Sarah's roses, the ones that had withered the day she died, as if the earth itself mourned her passing. Tyson's chest tightened with a familiar ache, the grief that never fully healed but scabbed over until something sharp enough cut it open again. "That's not possible." He knelt beside her, close enough to see the delicate tracework of scars across her wrists, the way her hands shook with exhaustion or fear. "Ronan's been dead 2 years. Snake bite got him down by Copper Creek. I helped carry his coffin." The woman, girl, really, beneath all that pain, smiled with no warmth whatsoever. It was the expression of someone who'd learned that the world's cruelest joke was hope itself. "Death don't always take, Mr. Beck. Sometimes it just changes a man's appetites, makes him hungrier for the things he can't have anymore." Lightning illuminated her face in stark detail, and Tyson saw something there that made his rancher's instincts scream danger. This wasn't just fear, this was knowledge. The kind that came from staring into hell and somehow crawling back out, forever marked by the journey. "I'm Indy," she said, as if introductions mattered when the world had gone mad. Indy Prescott. I was. I am the schoolteacher in Millhaven. Or was, before. Her voice caught, and she pressed her lips together as if holding back secrets that might poison the air between them. Thunder swallowed her words, but Tyson filled in the silence with his own dread. Millhaven was 40 miles south through hostile territory, Sioux hunting grounds and badlands that would challenge even experienced riders. What had driven this slip of a woman across such danger in a storm that would drown a man? Come inside. He offered his hand, unsurprised when she flinched away like a beaten animal. You're safe here. I give you my word on that. Your word. She laughed, and the sound held no humor, only the bitter wisdom of someone who'd learned that promises were made of morning mist and men's intentions. Men's words are like snowflakes, Mr. Beck, pretty while they last. Then they melt and leave you standing in the mud, wondering why you believed in something so fragile. But she rose anyway, swaying like wheat in a windstorm, her strength clearly at its limit. Tyson caught her elbow as she stumbled, and the contact sent a jolt through him. Not desire, exactly, but recognition. She was broken in the same places. He was, carrying wounds that wouldn't heal clean no matter how much time passed. Inside, the kitchen felt too small with another person in it. Indy stood dripping by the door like a half-drowned cat, her strange eyes taking in every detail. The child's drawings stuck to the icebox with horseshoe nails, the wedding photo on the mantel, the rifle hanging above the door within easy reach. You have a son, she observed, and there was something wistful in her voice, as if children were precious things she'd lost the right to be around. Knox. He's 6. Tyson busied himself with coffee and blankets, anything to avoid those penetrating eyes that seemed to see straight through his carefully constructed composure. Lost his mama 3 years back to the fever. Been just the two of us since. Same year I died the first time. The casual way she said it made his hands still on the coffee pot. Miss Prescott, you don't believe me. She accepted the cup he offered, wrapping her fingers around it like it held her soul, steam rising between them like incense. That's wise. Believing in ghosts is how you become one. Then convince me you're alive. She set down the coffee and rolled up her sleeve with deliberate precision. The scars on her wrists weren't random. They formed letters, carved deep and healed crooked in the poor light of whatever hell she'd escaped. RV, Ronan Vega's initials, branded into her flesh like she was cattle to be claimed and slaughtered. Atwell. He liked to mark his property, she said simply, her voice steady as stone. Even the ones he planted in the ground. Tyson's vision blurred red at the edges. He'd seen evil in his time. Claim jumpers, horse thieves, men who'd sell their mothers for a bottle of whiskey. But this was different. This was systematic cruelty. The kind that took pleasure in the breaking, that fed on suffering like vultures on carrion. Why'd you come here? His voice was hoarse with suppressed rage and something deeper, a recognition of kinship with the wounded. Why my ranch? Indy looked toward the stairs where Knox slept, and something shifted in her face. A maternal instinct, perhaps, or the memory of children she'd once taught to read and write and believe in better tomorrows. Because Ronan's coming, she whispered, and the words fell like stones into still water. He's been following me for days, and he's bringing friends. They'll be here by dawn, and they won't much care about witnesses. The coffee cup slipped from Tyson's numb fingers, shattering on the kitchen floor like his carefully constructed piece. But upstairs, Knox began to scream, and Knox's screams pierced the night like a wounded animal's cry, high and desperate and utterly terrified. Tyson took the stairs 3 at a time, his heart hammering against his ribs as Indy's footsteps followed close behind. The boys' room was awash in shadows that seemed to writhe and dance in the lamplight. And there was Knox, bolt upright in his narrow bed, eyes wide with the kind of terror that children shouldn't know existed. Daddy, Knox sobbed, reaching for him with trembling arms. There's a man at the window, a dead man with holes where his eyes should be. Tyson gathered his son against his chest, feeling the boy's rapid heartbeat through his thin nightshirt. Over Knox's shoulder, he could see the rain-lashed window, black as pitch beyond the glass. No face peered back at them, but the certainty in his son's voice made his blood run cold. Just a nightmare, boy, he murmured, though his own eyes never left the window. Storms got you spooked is all. But Indy had moved to the glass, her pale face reflecting ghostly in its surface. Her fingers traced something on the condensation, letters or symbols that made no sense in the dim light. RV, she whispered. He was here, watching. Knox's sobs quieted to hiccups, but his grip on Tyson's shirt remained fierce. The lady knows about the dead man. What dead man, Knox? Tyson's voice was carefully neutral, though dread pooled in his stomach like poison. Children saw things adults had learned to ignore or convinced themselves didn't exist. The one who comes sometimes. When you're working the far pasture. Knox's voice was small, matter-of-fact in the way children could be about impossible things. He stands by Mama's roses and watches the house. He's got no eyes, Daddy. Just empty holes that go down forever. Indy turned from the window, her face pale as moonlight. How long has he been visiting? Since the roses died, Knox said simply. Since Mama went to heaven and left us alone. 3 years. The same time Indy claimed Ronan had first buried her. Tyson's mind reeled with implications he didn't want to accept. Dead men didn't stand in gardens. Dead men didn't leave initials in window condensation. Dead men didn't. A sound from downstairs froze the words in his throat. The soft groan of the kitchen door opening despite the bolt he'd thrown across it. Heavy footsteps on the wooden floor, deliberate and measured as a funeral marched at Indy's. Hand flew to her throat. He's here. Tyson set Knox down gently, his mind racing through possibilities. The rifle hung in the kitchen, useless now. His Colt was in the bedroom, across the hall, but might as well be in Texas for all the good it would do. The footsteps were moving through the house with the confidence of someone who knew its layout, who had perhaps been watching for longer than any of them realized. The closet, he whispered to Knox, pointing to the narrow space where Sarah had once stored quilts and winter clothes. Hide in there, and don't come out no matter what you hear. You understand me, boy? Knox nodded solemnly, his small face grave with understanding beyond his years. As he crawled into the darkness, Tyson caught Indy's wrist. Tell me true, is Ronan Vega really dead? Her eyes held depths of sorrow that spoke of truths too terrible for words. Dead as anything can be. But death ain't the end for men like him. It's just a change of address. The footsteps had reached the bottom of the stairs. Each creak of the old wood sounded like a gunshot in the silence, and Tyson could smell something that didn't belong, the sweet, cloying scent of flowers left too long in still water, of roses rotting in the rain. There's another way out, Indy whispered, moving to the window with sudden purpose. The roof slopes gentle here. We can make it to the barn, maybe find horses. I'm not running from a ghost story. Tyson's jaw was set in lines that would have done his stubborn Scottish grandfather proud. This is my home. My son's home. If Ronan Vega wants trouble, he can have it. But even as he spoke, doubt gnawed at him. The footsteps had stopped at the landing, and in the silence he could hear something else, breathing that sounded wrong. Wet and labored like air being forced through damaged lungs. The smell of decay grew stronger, mixing with the rain-washed air until it was hard not to gag. You don't understand. Indy's voice was barely a breath. I ran from him for 3 days. Across country that would kill a cavalry regiment. Lost 2 horses to exhaustion. Nearly died of thirst in the Badlands. But he kept coming, kept following, like he could smell my fear from miles away. Then why lead him here? The question came out harsher than he'd intended, but terror made men cruel sometimes. Why bring this to my door, to my boy? Her face crumpled as if he'd struck her. Because I had nowhere else to go. Because every other door in 3 territories has been slammed in my face. Because when you're running from the devil himself, you grasp at any sanctuary you can find, even if it belongs to strangers. The breathing on the landing changed rhythm, becoming something that might have been laughter if laughter could sound. Like dirt being shoveled onto a coffin lid. A voice drifted up through the floorboards, honey smooth despite the wetness beneath it. Indy, darling, time to come home. She pressed her hands to her mouth, stifling a sob that wanted to become a scream. Tyson had heard that voice before, at barn raisings and cattle drives, arguing politics and telling jokes that made decent women blush. Ronan Vega's voice, unmistakable despite whatever had happened to the throat that produced it. He sounds. Tyson's voice failed him. Alive. Indy finished bitterly. That's the cruelest part. He talks like he always did, moves like he always did. It's only when you get close that you see the truth, see what's looking out through his eyes. The floorboard outside Knox's room groaned under substantial weight. Through the thin door, they could hear the soft scratch of fingernails against wood, patient as a cat waiting for a mouse to emerge from its hole. "I know you're in there, schoolmarm. Can smell the fear coming off you like perfume." The voice was conversational, almost friendly. "And you, Beck? Surprised to see me?" Death wasn't quite ready for old Ronan yet. Had too much unfinished business, you might say. Tyson's hands shook as he searched the room for anything that could serve as a weapon. A water pitcher, heavy and ceramic. Knox's wooden toy horse, solid oak with pointed ears. Nothing that would stop a living man, much less whatever Ronan had become. "Found something interesting down by Copper Creek," Ronan continued, and they could hear him settling against the door with the patience of eternity. "Seems that snake that bit me wasn't just any old rattler. Indians called it a spirit serpent," said. "Its venom could trap a man between worlds, make him something that ain't quite alive, but sure ain't dead neither." Indy had gone white as bone. He's been planning this. Even his death was just preparation. 3 years I've been learning what I can do now," Ronan's voice continued, thick with satisfaction. "Amazing how much stronger you get when you don't need to breathe regular, when pain becomes just another sensation to enjoy. Amazing what doors open when death itself bends the knee." The scratching at the door intensified and would begin to splinter. But from the closet came Knox's terrified whisper, "Daddy, there's another dead man looking through the window behind you." The window exploded inward in a shower of glass and splintered wood as something that had once been human crashed through. Tyson threw himself over Indy, feeling razor shards bite into his back as they hit the floor. The thing that landed in Knox's bedroom moved wrong. Joints bending at angles that would have snapped living bones, head twisted so far around it. Faced backward while its body crouched forward like a spider. This wasn't Ronan. This was something else, something worse. Its face had been handsome once, before whatever had happened to it in the ground. Now flesh hung in gray ribbons from skull that gleamed white through the gaps. And its eyes were indeed nothing but holes that seemed to tunnel straight down into hell itself. "Mira always was the impatient one," Ronan's voice drifted through the door, amused. "But she gets results." The creature, Mira, tilted its ruined head at an impossible angle, studying them with empty sockets that somehow still managed to convey hunger. When it spoke, grave dirt spilled from its mouth like black snow. "Pretty schoolteacher," it rasped. "Ronan says we can play with you before the planting. Says you're partial to games." Indy was shaking so hard her teeth chattered, but she managed to push herself to her knees. "Mira Travers. She was the banker's daughter in Millhaven. Died in a riding accident 2 winters past." "Accident?" The thing that had been Mira laughed, a sound like bones rattling in a tin cup. "Funny word for what Ronan did to me. But I forgave him when he brought me back, when he showed me what we could become together." Behind them, the closet door stood slightly ajar. Through the crack, Tyson could see Knox's wide eyes, could see his boy's small hand pressed against his mouth to keep from crying out. That sight gave him strength that had nothing to do with muscle and everything to do with the fierce protectiveness that lived in a father's heart. The ceramic water pitcher sat within reach. Tyson's fingers closed around its handle just as Mira lunged forward with inhuman speed. He swung with all his strength, connecting with what remained of her skull in a wet crunch that sent both of them tumbling backward. Mira rolled with the impact, coming up in a crouch that no living spine could have managed. Black ichor leaked from the crater in her head, but she was grinning, a ghastly expression made worse by the teeth that had fallen out and been jammed back in at random angles. Now that, she purred, felt good. The bedroom door finally gave way with a sound like breaking hearts. Ronan Vega filled the doorframe, and seeing him now, Tyson understood why Knox had described empty eye sockets. The man looked almost normal until you noticed the details. The way his chest didn't rise and fall with breathing, the blue-black tinge to skin that had been handsome enough to turn heads at church socials, the fact that his shadow fell in the wrong direction entirely. "Evening, Beck." Ronan touched the brim of his hat with mock courtesy. "Appreciate you looking after my property. But playtime's over. She's not your property." The words came out steadier than Tyson felt. "No woman belongs to any man, living or dead." Ronan's laugh was the sound of winter wind through a graveyard, spoken like someone who ain't learned the new rules yet. Death changes the game, neighbor. Makes everything negotiable. He stepped into the room, and the temperature dropped 10 degrees. Frost began forming on the broken window frame despite the summer storm outside. Where his boots touched the floor, the wood blackened as if burned from the inside out. Tell him, Indy, Ronan continued conversationally. Tell him what happens to folks who interfere with my collecting. Indy's voice was barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of witnessed atrocity. Eloan Bishop, the preacher's wife in Millhaven. She tried to help me escape the first time. Ronan. He made her husband watch while he turned her inside out. Slowly. Then he brought her back wrong, made her dance for his amusement until her bones snapped from the strain. Good times, Ronan agreed with fondness. Though I admit, the artistry was wasted on the preacher. Man had no appreciation for creative expression. Mira had been circling them during this exchange, moving with the predatory patience of a cat, playing with wounded mice. Now she crouched between them and the closet where Knox hid, her ruined face split in anticipation. Can I have the little one? She asked Ronan with the eager tone of a child requesting candy. I promise I'll be gentle. At first, every protective instinct Tyson possessed roared to life. He launched himself at the creature that had been Mira Travers, tackling her away from his son's hiding place. They crashed into the opposite wall hard enough to crack the plaster, her unnatural strength nearly matching his desperation-fueled fury. Her fingers, cold as January iron, closed around his throat. But as his vision began to darken, he heard something that made his heart skip, the soft creak of the closet door opening, followed by Knox's small voice, clear and unafraid. You ain't supposed to be here. Ronan turned toward the boy with interest. Well now, got some sand in you, don't you, little man? Just like your daddy. But Knox wasn't looking at Ronan. His gaze was fixed on empty air beside the broken window, and his next words made the temperature in the room drop another 10 degrees. Mama says you need to leave now. Says this house is protected. The effect on both creatures was immediate and dramatic. Mira released Tyson's throat with a hiss, scrambling backward as if burned. Ronan's composure cracked for the first time, revealing something underneath that might have been fear. Sarah, Indy breathed, and Tyson followed her gaze to where Knox was looking. For just a moment, less than a heartbeat, he could swear he saw her. Sarah as she'd been before the fever, beautiful and fierce, and utterly uncompromising when it came to protecting what was hers. The air shimmered like heat waves, and the scent of roses filled the room. Not rotting flowers, but the sweet perfume of blooms in full glory. Impossible, Ronan snarled, but he was backing toward the shattered window. The dead don't come back. Unless called. Unless bound. Maybe, Knox said with 6-year-old certainty, some folks just love too strong to let go all the way. The presence, whether real or imagined, seemed to grow stronger. Pictures on the walls stopped rattling from the storm wind. The frost on the window frame began to melt. And somewhere in the distance, Tyson could swear he heard a woman singing. A lullaby he remembered from better days. That Ronan's face twisted with rage and something deeper, the fury of a predator denied its prey. This ain't over, Beck. Can't hide behind ghosts forever. And when I come back, a gunshot from downstairs cut off his threat, followed by a voice Tyson recognized. Old Sheriff Greer from town, shouting orders to what sounded like a half-dozen men. Ronan's eyes went wide with something that might have been panic. For all his otherworldly power, he was still bound by some rules, still vulnerable to certain things. Iron bullets blessed in church water, Indy whispered, understanding dawning in her voice. Knox's teacher, Maisie Hollis, she must have figured out what was happening, brought help. But as the sounds of men ascending the stairs filled the house, Ronan smiled, an expression of pure malevolence that promised this was far from over. Next time, schoolmarm, he hissed as he and Mira melted back into shadow. There won't be any cavalry coming. Sheriff Greer's weathered face appeared. In the doorway, his silver badge catching the lamplight like a small star in the chaos. Behind him crowded 3 of his deputies and Maisie Hollis, the young schoolteacher whose normally tidy appearance was disheveled from hard riding through the storm. Her brown hair had escaped its pins, and her practical dress was mud-splattered. but her eyes burned with the fierce determination of someone who'd seen too much evil to back down now. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, Greer breathed, taking in the destroyed room, the broken window, and the frost patterns that had no business existing in July. What in Sam Hill happened here? Before Tyson could answer, Knox emerged from his closet. With the calm demeanor of a child who'd just witnessed the impossible and found it perfectly reasonable. The dead men came to take the lady away, but Mama sent them packing. Maisie knelt before the boy, her hands gentle as she checked him for injuries. Dead men, Sweet Pea? What did they look like? Like regular folks, mostly, Knox said matter-of-factly. Except for the holes where their eyes should be, and the way they moved all wrong. The lady one was missing bits. Indy had gone pale as parchment. Maisie, how did you know to come? How did you know what was happening? The young teacher's face was grim. Because I've been tracking these things for weeks now. Ever since I found old Henrik Voss's grave dug up from the inside. She produced a leather journal from her coat, its pages filled with meticulous handwriting and disturbing sketches. Henrik died last month of what we thought was natural causes. Turns out he was just the latest recruit. Sheriff Greer was examining the blackened floorboards where Ronan had stood. Miss Hollis came to me 3 days ago with a wild tale about the dead walking. Showed me evidence I couldn't ignore. Graves emptied out. Witnesses who'd seen familiar faces in windows of their dearly departed. He looked up at Tyson with haunted eyes. We loaded up with iron bullets blessed by 3 different preachers, and rode out soon as the storm led us. Not soon enough, Maisie muttered, opening her journal to reveal a hand-drawn map marked with red X's. Look at this pattern. Every person Ronan's brought back was someone who had unfinished business, unrequited love, unpaid debts, unsettled grudges. He's building an army of the bitter dead. Indy traced one of the X's with a trembling finger. Mira Travers. She was in love with the banker's son, but his father forbade the match. She died riding to a secret meeting with her lover. Henrik Voss lost his farm to creditors the week before he passed, Greer added grimly. Been carrying that anger like poison in his heart for months. And Eloan Bishop, Indy whispered. She died believing her husband loved the bottle more than he loved her. Maisie nodded grimly. All of them connected by resentment, by love turned sour or dreams denied. Ronan's been very selective in his recruiting. A new voice drifted up from the kitchen below, cultured, educated, touched with an accent that spoke of Eastern schools and fine breeding. How perceptive of you to notice the pattern, Miss Hollis. Though I'm afraid you're missing the larger design. The entire group tensed. Through the floor, they could hear someone moving around the kitchen with casual familiarity, the clink of china as if a guest were helping themselves to tea. Who is that? Greer whispered, his hand moving to his gun. Dr. Eloan Bishop. Indy's voice was barely audible. The preacher's wife. Ronan's masterpiece. Unlike the others, Eloan's voice carried no hint of the grave about it. She sounded refined, articulate, almost pleasant, which somehow made her presence more terrifying than all of Ronan's theatrical menace. Mr. Beck, she called up sweetly, would you be so kind as to join me for coffee? And bring Miss Prescott, of course. We have so much to discuss. Like hell? Tyson growled, but Maisie caught his arm. We need to know what they want, she whispered urgently. What their endgame is. If we're going to stop this, we need information. The lady's right, came Eloan's voice, somehow managing to sound both amused and threatening. Though I should mention that I've brought some friends with me. They're currently surrounding your barn, where I believe you keep your horses. Such magnificent animals. Would hate for anything unfortunate to happen to them. Through the broken window came the sound of horses screaming in terror. Not the usual sounds of animals spooked by storm, but the bone-deep cries of creatures confronted with something that violated the natural order. Greer cursed under his breath. That's our mounts out there too. We're trapped. Not trapped, Knox said quietly, tugging on his father's sleeve. Mama says there's another way. Through the old mine shaft behind the house. She says it connects to the creek, and from there, we can reach town. Tyson stared down at his son. Knox, what mine shaft? There ain't no mine on our property. There is now, the boy said with certainty that chilled them all. Mama says some doors only open when you need them most. Indy was studying the child with a new intensity. He's been seeing things, hasn't he? Ever since his mother died. Just dreams, Tyson said defensively. Nightmares about, not nightmares. Knox interrupted with 6-year-old patience. Visits. Mama comes sometimes when the dead folks are near. Says she made a bargain to stay close, to keep watch. Says love's stronger than death, but only if you're willing to pay the price. The implications of those words hit Tyson like a physical blow. Sarah, his beloved Sarah, bound to this place by love and determination, standing guard against forces that would claim their son. The thought was both wonderful and heartbreaking. Mr. Beck, Eloan's voice had taken on an edge of impatience. I'm afraid my invitation has an expiration date. Each moment you delay, more of my associates arrive. By dawn, we'll have quite the gathering. Maisie was studying her journal, flipping pages rapidly. There, she said, pointing to a sketch of symbols. These were carved into trees around every grave site. They're not random. They're a summoning circle drawn across multiple locations. He's been building towards something big. Harvest time, Indy whispered, understanding dawning in her eyes. He said something about harvest time when he first killed me. Said he was planting seeds for a special crop. The temperature in the room dropped again, and through the floorboards came the sound of more voices, a chorus of the dead, speaking in unison. Time to reap what was sown. But from somewhere deep in the house came another sound, the faint strains of Sarah's lullaby, growing stronger, as if she were gathering her own strength for the battle to come. And Knox looked up at his father with eyes far too knowing for his age. Daddy, Mama says it's time to choose. Run and let them win, or stand and fight for what's ours. The choice hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. Tyson looked down at his son. This brave, impossible boy who spoke with ghosts and saw doors that shouldn't exist, and felt something settle in his chest. Not peace, exactly, but the kind of grim certainty that came when a man stopped running from his fate and turned to face it head-on. We fight, he said simply, and the words seemed to echo through the house like a bell tolling. This is our home, our ground, and I'll be damned if I let them take it. Maisie nodded grimly, checking the blessed iron bullets in her rifle. Good, because I've been researching this curse, and I think I know how to break it. Sheriff Greer raised an eyebrow. You've been holding out on us, schoolmarm? Not holding out, hoping I was wrong. She turned to a page near the back of her journal, covered in symbols and notes. The binding that keeps them here isn't just about unfinished business. It's powered by a central source, someone who chose to stay behind, who made the original bargain with whatever dark force Ronan tapped into. Indy's face went white. The first grave. There's always a first grave. Exactly. And if we can find it, if we can sever that connection. Maisie's voice trailed off, but her meaning was clear. From downstairs, Eloan's cultured voice drifted up with increasing menace. I can hear you whispering up there, like children planning mischief. But dawn approaches, and with it, the culmination of 3 years' careful work. You cannot imagine what we've prepared for this night. Through the broken window, the eastern sky was indeed beginning to lighten, not with the warm gold of natural sunrise, but with a sickly green phosphorescence that made the storm clouds look like rotting flesh. Knox tugged at his father's hand. The door's opening now, Daddy. Mama says we have to go quick, before the dead ones figure out what we're doing. What door, son? But even as Tyson asked, he could see it. A shimmer in the air beside Sarah's old wardrobe, like heat waves rising from summer stone. The walls seemed to thin and bend, revealing darkness beyond that smelled of earth and ancient water. I'll be damned, Sheriff Greer breathed. Boy's right. There's something there. Maisie was already moving, stuffing her journal and supplies into a leather satchel. The mine Knox mentioned, it must be connected to the original settlement. This land has history we don't know about. They could hear footsteps on the stairs now, multiple sets, moving with the measured pace of a funeral procession. Whatever army of the dead Ronin had assembled was finally making its move. Go, Tyson ordered, pushing Knox toward the impossible doorway. Everyone through. I'll be right behind you. But as Knox approached the shimmering portal, he stopped and turned back. Mama says someone has to stay. Someone has to hold the door, while the others escape. The footsteps had reached the landing. Through the doorway, they could see shadows moving, more than just Ronan and his original companions. The hallway seemed filled with figures, more than should have been possible in the narrow space. I'll stay, Indy said quietly, her voice steady despite the terror in her eyes. This is my fault. I led them here. Like hell. Tyson's voice brooked no argument. Nobody stays behind. We all go, or nobody goes. But even as he spoke, he could feel the pull of the place, the responsibility that came with owning land and protecting family. This was his ground, bought with Sarah's love and Knox's laughter and 3 years of honest sweat. Some things were worth dying for. The shadows in the hallway coalesced into recognizable forms, not just Ronan and his core group, but dozens of others. Men and women from across 3 territories, all bearing the telltale signs of death and resurrection. Their eyes were hollow, pits that reflected the green light filtering through the windows, and when they moved, they did so in perfect unison, like parts of some vast, terrible machine. The harvest is ready, they intoned together, their voices creating a harmony that hurt to hear. Time to gather what was planted. Knox stepped through the portal first, his small form disappearing into the darkness beyond. Maisie followed, then Sheriff Greer and his deputies. Only Tyson and Indy remained, facing down an army of the dead with nothing but blessed bullets and stubborn pride. Touching, Ronan's voice came from somewhere in the mass of figures. But ultimately pointless. You can run to China and back. We'll still find you. The dead are patient, Beck. We have all the time in the world. Maybe, Tyson replied, backing toward the portal. But you forget something important, Ronan. And what's that? Tyson smiled grimly. You ain't the only one with friends on the other side. The temperature in the room plummeted as Sarah's presence manifested fully for the first time since her death. She appeared between Tyson and the advancing dead, translucent but unmistakably real, her eyes blazing with protective fury that made the storm outside look tame by comparison. This is my home, she said, her voice carrying the authority of love that had conquered death itself. My family, and you are not welcome here. The effect on Ronan's army was immediate and devastating. They recoiled as if struck by lightning, their unified movement breaking into chaos as Sarah's will crashed against theirs like a tidal wave against sand castles. Ronan himself materialized at the front of the group, his handsome face twisted with rage. Impossible. The dead cannot cross without invitation. I never left, Sarah replied simply. Love anchors, Ronan. Real love, not the twisted hunger you mistake for affection. And my love for this family is stronger than whatever darkness brought you back. The portal behind them was beginning to fade, Knox's voice drifting back through the thinning membrane. Daddy. Mama says hurry. Tyson grabbed Indy's hand and pulled her toward the disappearing doorway. As they crossed the threshold, he heard Sarah's voice one last time, filled with love and finality. Tell Knox I'll always be watching. Tell him love never really dies. It just changes shape. They tumbled through darkness that smelled of earth and water and ancient secrets, landing hard on stone that had been carved by human hands generations before. Behind them, the portal winked out with the sound of distant thunder, leaving them in absolute darkness save for the faint light of Maisie's lantern. But through the stone walls, they could hear something else, the sound of a house burning, of timbers crashing and voices screaming in defeat. Sarah's final gift, destroying the focal point that had allowed the dead to gather, breaking Ronan's hold on the world of the living. 6 months later, Tyson stood in his rebuilt kitchen, watching through new windows as Knox played in Sarah's restored garden. The roses had bloomed again, fuller and more beautiful than ever, as if fed by sacrifice and watered with tears of joy. Indy sat at the table, grading papers from her new position as Millhaven schoolteacher. The scars on her wrists faded too, thin silver lines that caught the morning light like promises kept. Sheriff Greer had confirmed that all the disturbed graves were finally at rest, their occupants returned to peaceful sleep. Sometimes, on quiet evenings when the wind was just right, Tyson could swear he heard Sarah's lullaby drifting through the house. And Knox, growing taller and wiser with each passing day, would smile and say, Mama's singing again. The dead stayed dead now, as they should. But love, real love, endured forever, taking root in rich soil and blooming eternal under Montana's endless sky. Well now, that there's quite a tale, ain't it? If stories of love conquering death and families standing strong against the darkness speak to your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe for more tales from the frontier. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? From the bustling cities to the quiet countrysides, every viewer's got their own story worth telling.